I'd like to invite Kelly Kern to come forward. Kelly and I spent the better part of this last week at annual conference. She's our representative from this congregation. Yeah, that one's good. And we shared together and laughter and song and sitting by each other. And one day we dressed just like this.
No
and people asked
planning.
if we planned that. We did not.
We did not.
We did not. But Kelly brings a word of her experience. And I'll share with you some observations of annual conference as well.
Good morning. Can you hear me? If you can't, I can actually speak louder. My family knows this. My son just laughed and went, yeah. So I'm going to share a little personal story first. I am a lifelong Methodist, grew up in Hot Springs, home of the annual conference. It should say that on the sign as you pull in, along with the boyhood home of Bill Clinton. And there were some references about that this week as well. Growing up, I never actually knew when annual conference was, except for when something in particular happened. And there was a preacher who was assigned to my church when I was younger, and I didn't even actually remember him being a preacher there until I got to be much older, and his name was Coleman Aiken. And he married my parents and my grandparents' living room. And I wasn't actually there for that. They're just pictures, and I've told, it actually did happen. And the way I knew that it happened, annual conference happened every year, is that he became so close to my family, he would stay with my grandparents every year when annual conference happened. And I described Coleman to somebody earlier as a shorter version of Sam Elliott with salt and pepper hair, and he rode in on his Harley into my grandparents' driveway. And he stayed with them. He had the Arkansas Razorback Fight song on as his ringtone, and that's how I knew annual conference was happening. And in thinking about that, and when I messaged my mom telling her I was going to be there for conference this week and could I stay with her, and she couldn't tell me no. I asked her if I could be her Coleman Aiken this week. So I felt like it all kind of came full circle because my grandparents were so involved, and then we had this fantastic gentleman who was a part of my family and not just my church family for so long. And it also made me think about him too, because Reverend Rodney Steele, who retired this past year, gave a sermon, and he talked about the prison in Zebulon, North Carolina, where he actually became the pastor. He was the prison chaplain there for many years, and so he would ride in on his Harley from Zebulon, North Carolina for many years. So I feel very blessed in many ways to have been part of this year's annual conference, and not just for the things that are happening now in our church family, but because of how I grew up. I got to meet several pastors and laity and heard some great ideas about children and youth ministry and how they're growing that in their own churches. And I've been very passionate about that over the last couple of years because both my children have been very involved in that, and I was not lucky enough to have that growing up in a very small Methodist church. So I'm excited to hear those things and bring them back to our church and our children and youth and share those things. So that's exciting to see that, it's not dwindling, but it is actually growing. The United Methodist Women, they had a representative from there talking about expanding involvement through various age groups. So it's not just for the older women in the United Methodist Church, it's for all women, and especially with what's happening in our world now as women, we need to unite in all age groups. Community meals is outreach. I thought this was a phenomenal idea, and not treating it as a soup kitchen, but making it as a community meal, and that's how you do outreach. You don't charge anybody anything. It's not a fundraiser, and you just welcome everyone. We could post it on the blessing box, and it's not anything that anybody needs to be ashamed of, because we really are trying to do away with hunger, not just in Saline County, but all over Arkansas. And so I thought that would be something fantastic we could bring back here. I was very impressed and pleasantly surprised to see the very concentrated involvement with our youth that were there. They had a really nice representation, and it was very clear to me in hearing certain conversations that had not happened in the past. So I was very excited to see that. And in that, Reverend Rodney Steele also mentioned when we're trying to create those disciples in Jesus, that we are spirited stewards. And I love that. So when we talk about how we're creating those disciples, what we become is those spirited stewards to continue to bring his message. Another thing is that we get to vote during the general conference, or the annual conference, for our delegates to go to the next general conference. And more laity were voting than clergy. We did it electronically, and so we could actually see how many people voted at any given time and where the votes kind of landed. But usually anywhere between 100 and 125 more laity than clergy, so I thought that was kind of interesting. There are also free online courses for use in small groups, personal spiritual development, and Sunday school classes at arumcmyabsorb.com. So as a Sunday school class, or if you're looking to start a small group, there are all these free courses there that are available that were created for us to use as a fantastic tool. I thought that was pretty amazing. The report from the General Conference was more of a thank you to the representatives than an actual report. I thought that was interesting that nothing was really said, and I know that, some people fall on both, either side of the fence, and it's a very sensitive subject about what's happening in our church right now. But the fact that nothing was said spoke more loudly to me than what was actually said. So just as a thank you, it wasn't really a report to me. It was just appreciating their time and representing Arkansas. Young man, John Mark Mathis, he's part of the ACCYM. He's the chair for the youth council. I really took a lot away from what he said. One, he is a very smart young man, and he has a very bright future ahead of him. I was extremely impressed. I think he's from Greenbrier. Yeah. So he had taught, and I forgot to mention this last time. He had talked about how a former youth pastor of his, there was a phrase that he took away that he continues to tell people: God does not call the qualified, he qualifies the called. How outstanding. I mean, seriously. That's it. I mean, and that was huge. I mean, I'm sitting there going, golly, this kid is in high school. Yeah, and I'm writing more notes from him than some of the older folks in the room. It's true. He mentioned how easy it is to leave the United Methodist Church right now, and it's harder to stay. And with what's happening now, he felt like more youth were interested in being in leadership and staying as opposed to going. And I think that's why we had such a larger presence this year than we had in the past years, because what's happening now affects them probably so much more than it affects us in so many different ways, because I said it in Sunday school, there are voices moving forward, and we can talk until the cows come home, but all voices matter. I mean, I went by the Hendricks table because I asked Susan, she had the same button, and it says, I love younger voices. And it's not just our voices, it's all voices. And in thinking about Youth 2019, because I'm helping organize that for Debbie, and I've been trying to come up with something to put on a shirt for us to wear. And the motto this year is love well. And in listening to John Mark talk and the message that he sent, it just came to me. It was love well, love all, love wins.
Put that on a shirt.
Yeah, and I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to make Kristen Korn any busier than she probably already is, but I'm on board to make anybody who wants that, and it's going to have our church name on it too. But best of all, God is with us, and regardless on whichever side you fall on, we all need to love each other and respect each other. And that was the common theme of this conference, is that regardless of what your thoughts are, all thoughts matter, all voices matter. We all need to love each other. So thank you for allowing me to have this opportunity to represent you at the conference. I don't even know why I did this, but in the moment I go, I think I want to come back next year. So even though I'm not going to be the lay leader, I've volunteered to come back next year because I think it's important. I told everybody Before I went to that, I was going to listen and have ears on the ground and be attentive and listen to what people were saying. And I feel it's important that we just don't think whatever's decided is decided, because we still matter, and we've got a lot of work ahead of us because we are United Methodists, and it's not just our church, it's all the churches. So thank you.
Gosh.
And the most important thing, like they saved the best for last too, the reappointment of Reverend Susan Ledbetter. I love her, and that was so exciting. I mean, and it was right there on my notes. It says it with a little heart and everything. So.
I am so glad to be reappointed to this church. I'm thrilled that this is my place and that we share in ministry together. Some of the things I'll just piggyback shortly, briefly. The experience I had at annual conference, the theme was picked, Best of All, God is with us. And it is, as Kelly said, it's a new day in the Arkansas Annual Conference. There was a very real kind of active nature of how are we going to vote on delegates for the next general conference coming up in Minneapolis in 2020, after the special call general conference in 2019, February this year, that was talking about whether or not to change the book of discipline in relationship to where we are on issues of homosexuality and inclusivity in ordaining openly gay persons or conducting weddings in our congregations for such. So we have seen a shift in the Arkansas Annual Conference in terms of delegates elected. There was a great amount of organization going on and conversation, and really kind of two groups of representation, right? So like our church, we are on a spectrum of belief, if you want to call them conservative or progressive or in the middle. What we saw for 20 delegates elected, 10 laity and 10 clergy, for general conference and then jurisdictional conference, which is our region of the country, and alternates for those conferences. 17 or 18 of the 20 elected were centrist to progressive folks who likely would have voted for the one church plan. And so that is a shift, a great shift in what we saw about kind of where we thought the conservative vote or the traditional vote that supported the traditional plan. Now, our conference isn't the only one to have made that shift in recent weeks, and every annual conference is meeting in this season. The Texas conference likewise saw kind of a shift. So and you can see things happening around annual conferences that are a statement about not supporting the traditional plan that was adopted in February of 2019. So there's a lot to determine. I'll echo what Kelly said, where I felt like there wasn't a lot of conversation about general conference that had just happened, nor what to expect about the one to come. We didn't hear about some of the things that are going on in our own conference that are in direct response to General Conference 2019. So I feel like it was sort of business as usual in a sense of we were there for worship and to hear from the bishop about his message was about double down, to use a gambling term in Hot Springs. Double down on your ministry efforts and plant yourself in ministry to the people in your church and your community, and to continue to reach out and share the love of Jesus Christ. That's the mission, right? But the unknowns about what to expect in terms of our denomination going forward, we can only remain to speculate and pray and to see what comes. So I wanted to share with you that kind of information, but to say thank you for receiving me as your reappointed pastor. I do love being here, and this is a place of love and fellowship and growth in the Spirit, and so we will continue to offer ourselves to that, as Kelly said, because we love and because Christ so loved us.